Aloha everyone and welcome to another Tinker's Academy video. I'm your host Kay Elmer and this is a video response to a question I received on Telegram from one of our members who was specifically asking me about some kind of electro healing kind of question. And it boils down to like, well, this individual is prepping for health and healing, prepping, the whole idea behind preparedness. And so here's the question, and let me share the response. It's just a lot of information that I just simply don't want to have to type out on Telegram. So I thought I'd just do this quick video as a response. And you know who you are out there, and I hope this helps. Anyway, so this was the question. I wanted to share it with the rest of you because it's a great question. And, the answer is the answer. So here we go. I wonder if you might be able to assist me with purchasing a sound frequency device or two that is good for groups, but also programmable. I know a few different ones like the Spooky 2, the EE Systems Bioscaler, and the Multi-Wave Oscillator. If you have no devices, which one of these would you get? Or would you recommend something different? And best websites to get one or two from. Given we may be going into more challenging times, being able to treat all kinds of diseases and program it with frequencies if needed would be very useful. Budget is between $5,000 to $10,000. Asking for a friend who wants to invest in something for our community. Any ideas most welcome. And so that is a great question. And actually, you wouldn't believe how many times I've gotten that question. But the first response to that is, well, there's no one size fit all device or protocol or modality. So, really, you really got to narrow it down. But my question was, what do you plan to treat, And the answer was, if the, shift hits the fan and people no longer trust doctors and hospitals, then it would be a wide variety of things, different things, especially if we get more aerosol poison from the skies. So having the biggest choice in terms of protocols and the ability to detox all the body organs would be the best. Okay, so that's the question. So let me just here's my answer to that question. So very first thing off the bat, I just want to share without elaborating too much that I used to be a hardcore prepper. I literally could write books and teach classes and, subject matter expert on preparedness as well as survivalism and all of that. I used to be that crazy, okay? I'm a lot less crazy in my old age. So when it comes down to, hey, no longer trusting doctors or hospitals, I think a lot of us have already reached that point years ago. I know I have. But when it really comes down to preparing, the whole idea behind preparing, again, is like, well, what are you going to do? What's your use case? And so the use case really for the typical prepper is injuries and illnesses, right? Because they're thinking in terms of like, hey, a 911's not coming. I got to take care of it myself. Broken bone, gunshot wound, burn, whatever, right? Or somebody gets sick, right? And that's kind of really it. It's really serendipitous that I recently did a poll on that and discovered that 1 out of 5 people in my chat group, were very prepared, which is awesome. But then the majority were anywhere from between to somewhat prepared in terms of being able to handle like CPR situations and field triage and that sort of thing. Anything more than, a boo-boo, right? But so the idea here, though, is what are you going to do? What do you want to do? And what do you need to prep for? And so I just want to expand the idea that, hey, you know what? You need to think more about what's all the different things that can happen. So you've got injuries, clearly, right? Because it's going to be a difficult time and anything can happen, right? Illnesses, highly likely. Diseases, you're going to have pre-existing conditions prior to the event, right? And that you're going to have to treat the issue during the event and so forth. So disease states, right? What disease states do you have in your group that are going to need continual maintenance throughout the period of time that, whatever the situation might be, severe weather, trapped out in the wilderness, whatever. But then also too, you mentioned health, specifically detoxing, and that's very important, because that's going to maintain your health. And the other thing you need to think about in terms of prepping is the nutrition. These are the things. The typical prepper only focuses on injuries and illnesses, and a lot of the preppers are, there's a huge fallacy to prepping. I don't want to make a video about that, but it's really like, they kind of just don't really think about pre-existing conditions and diseases as well as detox and nutrition. So that's not this video. But the question really comes down to is, hey, what do I recommend? So let's talk about this. So if we were to talk about what type of electro healing, i.e. bioelectrical magnetic healing device, would work for injuries, illnesses, and let's toss in disease. So let's say these 3 things. I'm not going to go into health, nutrition, but we'll talk about at least these 4 things. Injuries, illnesses, and disease. The question was: is would Rife be good for that? Would scalar multi-wave oscillators, and for that budget? That was the question, and the answer is no. None of those would work for that, in my opinion. Okay, I am some general rando on the internet, so definitely, hey, you should listen to me. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm a rando on the internet, but I'm telling you, with 20 years of experience, I would not trust any of these things in a SHFT environment. And this is the reason why. I've owned all of them. I've tried them a lot. I mean, years of experimenting, tinkering, and they just never produced any results for me. And I've had different models of different things. So honestly, I don't, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff out there, but nah. My experience is these three aren't going to do the job. But what will do the job, and what has the most potential for, and I also have all these things. Okay, so I have all this stuff. I also have this stuff still, right? I still have it because I've been tinkering, but I have all this stuff on the bottom. And what I would recommend is for injuries and diseases. There's two really strong choices. One is using a CNAR, right? Self-controlled and electro something. I forgot the acronym, but it's called a CNAR. And the other one is using a microcurrent device. Either one of these two types of devices are designed, and if you look at their user guides, and I've used them for myself, to treat injuries and to treat disease. Okay, so you've got two of the three things that these devices can do for. Like I said, there's no one size fit all. And then for illnesses, using a Beck Zapper has been my go-to for 20 years. Okay, so between having either one of the CNARs or microcurrent and a zapper, plus the supplies that you would need to go with this stuff, right? Because if you have an injury, like I have a very vast, kind of like an EMT kit. I keep one in my car. I have one in my home. It's got everything from burns to breaks and sprains to, I can, basically handle triage, right? I just prepared. And so I keep one in both places, but you need supplies. Okay. But if you're just looking at the devices themselves, you either need a CNAR or a microcurrent for injuries and diseases, and an illness. And really what I recommend, because that was the question, which is in your CNARs, you need to Google any one of these four brands. And these are the longest running, most established brands that have been out there. They're all Russian brands because the Russians invented CNARs, and they run anywhere from 500 to 4,000 per unit. And of course, the cool thing about it is, in a SHFT environment, they run off batteries. You can get a solar battery charger, and you don't need, you can do this all off grid. It's handheld. You can put it in a backpack, and off you go. So very, very handy from a standpoint of, adding it to your prepper kit, and it will treat injuries and diseases. And so now the other thing too is that the microcurrent. Now there's two different kinds of microcurrents. I actually own the biomodulator with the biotransducer. You can, it's available through the Dr. Jerry Tennant. But also too, my wish list is if I could have one for my home, because the biomodulator is mobile, runs off batteries, like I just said, great thing to have in a prepping scenario. But then the other microcurrent device that I know, because I've just seen the science and I've just studied it for so long, is what they call frequency specific microcurrent. And this is a different device, and it comes with a lot of training. But if you were going to be in a, let's say, we're going to basically, I guess what is it called? Like something in place. You stay in place, and that's how you're going to, wait out the trouble. And so if you're going to do that, and you're going to stay in your house, and you don't have a, get out of Dodge plan, then you would want to stay in your house. And if you're going to do that, then I would say FSM would be a great way to go. It is a little bigger unit. It does plug into the wall. Biomodulators, biotransducers have batteries. So, keep that in mind, how you're going to power these things. But either one of them are exceptional. They've got a great history and the science that backs them up in terms of being able to, effectively treat injuries and illnesses. Okay, injuries and diseases. Okay, and those are the two things for injuries and diseases. And so, kind of just give you some websites here. Basically, like the Tennant. If you just go to tennanthealth.com, you can take a look at the biomodulator and the biotransducer. Or if you want to go to frequencyspecific.com, you can see the person here is Carol McMakin, and she's like literally the grandma, the goat on FSM. So, and it just talks a lot about that. So you can kind of learn more about that right there like that. And so that's going to be there. Now, those devices will cost anywhere from $5,000 to $12,000 just for those. Either option, but you don't need both. You just need either one. And so that's something to think about. Now, from the standpoint of illnesses, Beck Zapper. I did a Beck Zapper product review. Those zappers really don't run that much, but it does. You do need supplies for it. So if you're interested in getting that, then I have an entire series on my blog. If you go to my blog, the Tinker's Academy, click on bioelectrical healing. Okay, and so it's got all this stuff I've done in the past and all that material. If you just look right here, I've got the blood electrification and the Bob Beck protocol, and then here's a Beck Zappers product review. These two things will point you to all of the equipment and the way to do it. And I'm telling you that I swear by this thing. I absolutely, you wouldn't believe how many times I've been, on death's door with some kind of virus or infection or something, and this thing nailed it every single time, 100% of the time. So, highly, highly, highly stand by the Bob Beck protocol in terms of treating illnesses and infections and things like that. Okay, so that's my recommendation there. Now, let's talk about the detox thing you did ask about. So, I just want to say right off the bat, when you talk about detox, there's a lot of things that we need to be worried about in today's world. And that, it's not just pathogens and parasites anymore. Of course, people worry about heavy metals, and you did mention toxins, which, the aerosolized poisons are heavy metals and toxins, floating down from the sky. So yeah, you definitely have those things to worry about in addition to parasites and pathogens. But then, of course, what are you talking about as well? If you're really, really, really focused on your health, you don't trust doctors and hospitals, you need to be thinking about, oh, I need to detox this, and microplastics and spike proteins and nanotechnology. This is not a detox video. What I'm trying to tell you is that the only thing the thing that's great for pathogens, which are bloodstream pathogens, are the Beck Zappers, right? That's why they work so well when you're sick. They just completely clean out your blood. Then the other thing too, if you're looking at parasites, then you want to look at Clark Zappers. It's a different kind of zapper. Dr. Hulda Clark got tons of information on that. I got a full notebook on my blog on everything Clark ever wrote. You can just ask all the questions right there. And then, of course, the heavy metals, toxins, microplastics, spike proteins, and nanotechnology. All of those things are all individual detox protocols that don't involve technology. Okay, so if really, when you're thinking about this, it's not going to be a bioelectrical magnetic device that you're going to need to get. There's all these different things. Each one of them have different protocols. Again, this is not that video, but that's what you should be thinking about. Okay, in terms of if you're looking at doing that. So, back to your original questions, if I didn't have anything, what would I get? Well, yeah, I would get this, which I do have. I actually own 2 different kinds of CNRs and multiple kinds of zappers. Okay, did videos on them. And that takes care of these top 3. And then in terms of the rest of this stuff, I actually I'm actively doing a Clark cleanse right now. And I just I circulate through all this. I'm constantly detoxing, and I target one of these 7 things, and I do that for a few months, and then I just switch to the next one and target that, right? With all these different protocols. I don't want to do them I don't want to do too many at once. You don't want to kick off a Herx. So that's kind of how I do it, is I look at these as 7 different things to detox, and I do them 2 months at a time, and I just rotate throughout the year. And right now I am completely focused on parasites and doing Clark right now. And so that's kind of how I do it, but that's not going to be something you can buy a device for. That's just the point I want to make. So anyway, that's my answer. I really hope it was helpful. I hope, I hope this information helps anybody else too. It's really important, guys. I'm not a hardcore prepper anymore because I just think that, living in the doomsday mentality is so negative for our brains. And so I don't worry about it anymore. I am prepared, but I don't worry about it. That's a huge different way of thinking, as a prepper. But this should help anybody that's interested in basically being more self-sufficient, which is what it all comes down to. All right. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. Aloha. Have a great day.